The Shadow of the Temple, The Rise and Fall of the Knights Templar, Part 1. Introduction, The Echo of History. History is often written in blood, but seldom is it as shrouded in mystery, gold, and contradiction as the story of the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. We know them today simply as the Knights Templar. To some, they were the ultimate defenders of the faith. To others, they were occultists and heretics who grew too powerful for their own good. Their story begins in the dust of the Levant, in a world where the sword and the cross were inextricably linked. It is a tale that spans 2 centuries, from the rugged hills of Judea to the royal courts of Paris. But to understand how they fell, we must first understand why they rose. We must travel back to a time when the roads to Jerusalem were paved with both hope and death. Chapter 1. The Birth in the Ruins. The year is 1099. The First Crusade has reached its bloody climax. The walls of Jerusalem have fallen, and the city is once again under Christian control. But the victory was fragile. While the city itself was secure, the surrounding countryside was a lawless wilderness. For the thousands of pilgrims traveling from Europe to witness the Holy Sepulchre, the journey was a gauntlet of bandits, marauders, and desert raiders. Enter Hugues de Payens, a knight from the Champagne region of France. In 1119, he and 8 companions approached King Baldwin II of Jerusalem with a radical proposal. They would take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, just as monks did, but they would not retreat into a monastery. Instead, they would pick up the sword. They would become warriors of Christ. The king, desperate for security, granted them a headquarters in a wing of the royal palace. This palace sat on the site of the ancient Temple of Solomon, or the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It was from this location that they took their name, the Templars. In those early days, the order was truly poor. Their official seal, an image of 2 knights sharing a single horse, symbolized their initial lack of resources. They survived on the charity of the faithful, patrolling the dusty roads and guarding the mountain passes. For 9 years, they remained a small, obscure brotherhood. But beneath the surface, something was stirring. Chapter 2. The Spiritual Architect. The Templars might have remained a footnote in history if not for one man, Bernard of Clairvaux. Bernard was the most powerful churchman of his age, a mystic, a diplomat, and a master of words. He saw in the Templars the perfect manifestation of the new knighthood. In 1129, at the Council of Troyes, Bernard helped draft the Latin Rule, the code of conduct that would govern every aspect of a Templar's life. It was a life of extreme discipline. A Templar knight was to cut his hair short, but grow a long, flowing beard. He was forbidden from hunting, laughing excessively, or even looking a woman in the face, including his own mother. Their armor was their habit. Their prayers were their rhythm. Bernard wrote a treatise titled In Praise of the New Knighthood, which gave the Templars a moral license that no other army possessed. He argued that when a Templar killed an enemy in battle, it was not homicide, but malicide, the destruction of evil itself. This theological blessing transformed the order into a spiritual elite. Suddenly, every noble family in Europe wanted to donate land, money, and sons to the temple. Chapter 3. The White Mantle and the Red Cross. As the 12th century progressed, the Templars became a formidable military machine. Their appearance was iconic. Every knight wore a white mantle, symbolizing purity and light. In 1147, Pope Eugene III granted them the right to wear a red cross over their hearts, the cross patée. This cross was a symbol of martyrdom. It told the world that the wearer was ready to die for Christ at any moment. But the order was more than just knights. It was a complex hierarchy. Below the knights were the sergeants, who wore black or brown mantles and acted as light cavalry and support. Then there were the chaplains, who tended to the spiritual needs of the brothers, and the vast network of craftsmen, laborers, and administrators who kept the machine running. The discipline on the battlefield was legendary. A Templar was forbidden from retreating unless the odds were more than 3-1, and even then if his commander gave the order. They were the first in the charge and the last in the retreat. Their banner, the bosant, a simple rectangle of black and white, became a symbol of terror for their enemies and a beacon of hope for their allies. Chapter 4. The Masters of the Coin. While their fame was built on the battlefield, their true power was built in the counting house. The Templars were the world's first multinational corporation. Because they were answerable only to the Pope, they were exempt from taxes and tithes. They owned thousands of estates across Europe, from vineyards in France to mills in England and farms in Spain. This vast network allowed them to invent modern banking. A nobleman in London could deposit a sum of gold at the local temple branch, receive a coded parchment, and then withdraw the equivalent value in silver upon reaching Jerusalem or Acre. This system bypassed the dangers of carrying physical treasure across pirate-infested seas and bandit-run roads. Soon, the Templars were the primary creditors to the kings of Europe. They managed the French royal treasury. They financed the wars of English monarchs. They were no longer just poor fellow soldiers. They were the most powerful financial institution the world had ever seen. Their preceptories, their fortified command centers, dotted the European landscape, serving as banks, recruitment centers, and symbols of their untouchable status. The Shadow of the Temple. Part 2. Blood, Stone, and Survival. Chapter 5. Masters of the Fortress. As the Templars grew in wealth, they transformed the landscape of the Holy Land. They were not just warriors, they were the greatest architects of the medieval world. They understood that in the burning deserts of the Levant, a sword could only hold a line, but a stone fortress could hold a kingdom. They built and occupied massive strongholds that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Castles like Safed, Castel Pellegrino, and Tortosa were masterpieces of military engineering. These were not mere barracks, they were self-sustaining cities with sophisticated water systems, granaries that could feed thousands for years, and walls so thick that no catapult of the era could breach them. The Templar castle was a psychological weapon. Its presence on a hilltop sent a clear message to the local populations and invading armies: we are here, and we do not intend to leave. From these towers, the knights could monitor the movement of caravans and armies, acting as the nervous system of the Crusader states. Chapter 6. The Lion and the Crescent. By the mid-1100s, the political winds in the East began to shift. The fragmented Muslim world was beginning to unite under a leader of immense charisma and tactical genius, Saladin, known to history as Saladin. Unlike previous enemies, Saladin respected the Templars as much as he hated them. He recognized that they were the firebrands of the Christians, the only force that never wavered and never surrendered. For the Templars, the rise of Saladin was the ultimate test of their vows. The conflict reached its boiling point in 1187 at the Battle of Hattin. It was a day of fire and blood. The Christian army, exhausted and dying of thirst, was lured into a trap between two volcanic peaks. The Templars fought with a desperation that bordered on the supernatural. They charged again and again into the scorching heat, their white mantles stained red. But the desert was unforgiving. The Christian army was annihilated. When Saladin surveyed the battlefield, he spared most of the captured knights for ransom, but not the Templars. He ordered every captured brother of the temple and the hospital to be executed on the spot. He knew that as long as one Templar lived, the war would never truly end.
Chapter 7. The Lionheart and the Recovery. The loss of Jerusalem sent shockwaves through Europe. The holy city was gone, and the order of the temple was on the brink of extinction. But out of the grief came the Third Crusade, led by the legendary Richard the Lionheart. During this campaign, the Templars found a new purpose. They became Richard's most trusted advisors and his elite shock troops. At the Battle of Arsuf, it was the disciplined charge of the Templars and the Hospitallers that finally broke Saladin's line. Though Richard failed to retake Jerusalem, the Templars helped secure a strip of the coast centered on the city of Acre. For the next century, Acre would be the heartbeat of the order. It was here that they built their most magnificent sea fortress, a place where the power of the temple reached its absolute zenith. They were now more than just protectors. They were diplomats, playing the complex game of Middle Eastern politics, often negotiating with the very enemies they were sworn to fight.
Chapter 8. The Twilight of Outremer. The 13th century was a slow, agonizing sunset for the Crusader states. While the Templars were at the height of their financial power in Europe, their military position in the East was eroding. A new, more ruthless force had emerged from Egypt, the Mamluks. The Mamluks were slave warriors who fought with a ferocity that matched the Templars' own. One by one, the great fortresses fell. In 1291, the Mamluk Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil arrived at the gates of Acre with an army that blackened the horizon. The siege of Acre was the Templars' Götterdämmerung, their twilight of the gods. For weeks they fought on the crumbling walls as the city burned around them. When the walls finally breached, the last remaining knights retreated to their fortified sea castle. They fought for 10 more days until the building itself collapsed under the weight of the Mamluk mines, burying both the defenders and the attackers in the rubble. With the fall of Acre, the dream of a Crusader Holy Land was dead. The Templars retreated to the island of Cyprus. They had no more pilgrims to protect. They had no more roads to guard. For the first time in their history, the Knights Templar were an army without a war. Chapter 9. The Seeds of Envy. While the knights were bleeding in the East, their brothers in Europe were living in a world of luxury and influence. This disconnect would prove fatal. In the eyes of the common people, the Templars were heroes of a lost cause, but in the eyes of kings, they were a threat. The order owned over 9,000 manors across Europe. They were richer than any monarch. They had their own laws, their own army, and they answered to no one but a distant and often weak pope. In Paris, King Philip IV, known as Philip the Fair, watched the Templars with growing resentment. Philip was a king of iron and ice, calculating, cold, and deeply in debt. The Templars were his primary creditors. They owed him a fortune he could never hope to repay. As long as the Templars were fighting in the Holy Land, they were untouchable. But now they were back in Europe, sitting on heaps of gold, with no clear mission. The whispers began in the dark corners of Philip's court. Allegations of secret rituals, of spitting on the cross, of strange idols worshipped in the dead of night. The trap was being set. The most powerful order in Christendom had no idea that their greatest enemy wasn't a sultan in the desert, but a king in their own backyard. The Shadow of the Temple. Part 3. The Great Betrayal and the Eternal Legacy.
Chapter 10. The King's Gambit. By the year 1307, King Philip IV of France was a man backed into a corner. His treasury was empty, his currency was devalued, and he was humiliated by his debts to the Order of the Temple. Philip was not just a monarch, he was a master of propaganda and statecraft. He realized that to destroy the Templars, he could not simply fight them, he had to destroy their soul. He began to gather evidence from disgruntled former members and spies. He wove a tapestry of accusations that would shock the medieval mind. That the Templars, in their secret initiation ceremonies, were forced to deny Christ, spit upon the cross, and indulge in ritualistic depravity. These were the ultimate crimes in a world ruled by faith. Philip acted with a cold, surgical precision that still chills historians today. He sent out sealed letters to every bailiff and seneschal in France, with strict orders not to open them until the night of October 12th. Chapter 11. Friday the 13th. As the sun rose on Friday, October 13th, 1307, the traps were sprung simultaneously across the kingdom. Thousands of Templars, from the battle-hardened knights in Paris to the elderly farm managers in the provinces, were dragged from their beds and thrown into iron chains. They were blindsided. The very king they had protected, whose treasury they had managed, had turned into their executioner. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master, was among those arrested in Paris. This day, Friday the 13th, would forever be etched into the Western psyche as a day of ill omen and darkness. The arrests were followed by an ordeal that was perhaps worse than death. The Templars were handed over to the Inquisition. In the damp, dark cells of the Temple in Paris and the dungeons of France, the question was applied. The Templars were subjected to the rack, the pulley, and the application of fire to their feet. Broken by unimaginable pain, many knights confessed to the most absurd charges. They spoke of a bearded head they worshipped, an idol called Baphomet. They spoke of a secret religion within a religion. These confessions were exactly what Philip needed. He wasn't just killing men, he was killing a legend. Chapter 12. The Silence of the Pope. While Philippe was the architect of the destruction, Pope Clement V was his reluctant accomplice. Clement was a sickly man, living under the shadow of the French crown. He knew in his heart that many of the charges were fabrications, but he lacked the courage to defy Philippe. In 1312, at the Council of Vienne, the Pope issued the bull Vox in Excelso. He did not condemn the order for heresy, but he dissolved it by apostolic decree, citing that its reputation was now so tarnished that it could no longer function.
The vast properties of the temple were officially handed over to their rivals, the Knights Hospitallers, though in reality much of the gold and land was swallowed up by the French crown. Chapter 13. The Curse from the Flames. The drama reached its final horrific climax on March 18, 1314. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Temple, had spent 7 years in a dungeon. He was a man who had seen his order destroyed and his brothers disgraced. He was led out to a small island in the Seine River, in the shadow of Notre Dame Cathedral, to be burned at the stake as a relapsed heretic. But as the flames began to lick at his feet, the old warrior found his voice one last time. He retracted every confession he had made under torture, declaring the order of the temple to be innocent and holy. According to legend, through the smoke and fire, de Molay issued a terrifying summons. He called upon King Philippe and Pope Clement to meet him before the judgment seat of God within a year. The result was chilling. Pope Clement died just 33 days later. King Philippe was struck down by a mysterious stroke during a hunt before the year was out. The curse of the Templars had begun its work, and the royal line of Philippe, the cursed kings, would soon wither into extinction. Chapter 14. The Lost Treasure and the Secret Fleet. But did the Templars truly vanish? This is where history ends and legend begins. On the night before the arrests in 1307, witnesses reported seeing a series of heavily guarded wagons leaving the Paris Temple, heading toward the port of La Rochelle. It is said that the Templar fleet, the most powerful navy in the Atlantic, vanished into the mist. Where did they go? Some believe they fled to Scotland, where they allegedly helped Robert the Bruce win the Battle of Bannockburn. Others point to the mysterious Rosslyn Chapel, with its intricate carvings that some claim represent Templar secrets. There are even more radical theories suggesting they reached the shores of the Americas a century before Columbus, carrying with them the legendary Holy Grail, or the Ark of the Covenant. While historians find little evidence for these claims, the persistence of the myths is a testament to the Templars' power. They left behind a vacuum that the human imagination has been trying to fill for 700 years. Chapter 15. The Shadow in the Modern World. The Knights Templar never truly died. They became the blueprint for every secret society that followed. From the Freemasons of the 18th century, who claimed direct descent from the Knights, to the modern-day obsession with the Da Vinci Code and Assassin's Creed, the Templars remain the ultimate symbols of hidden knowledge and lost greatness. They were a bridge between two worlds, the spiritual devotion of the Middle Ages and the global financial connectivity of the modern era. They were the first to understand that power is not just held by the sword, but by the coin and the network. Today, when we look at the ruins of a Templar preceptory or the round walls of their churches, we are looking at the ghosts of a world that might have been. They were the guardians of the Holy Land, the bankers of kings, and the victims of the first great state-sponsored conspiracy. The temple is gone, but the shadow it casts across history is longer than ever. The knights in their white mantles and red crosses continue to ride through our dreams, reminding us that even the most powerful empire can be brought down by a single stroke of a king's pen, but that a legend, once born, can never be truly killed.